Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, the Swansea City podcast. I'm Guto, and tonight we've got a full house because with me we have Steve Carroll and Matt Barocco. How are you, boys?
Miserable.
The silence, I think the silence speaks volumes.
That gives you listeners a preview of what's to come. It's not going to be the cheeriest of podcasts. We've got two games to look back at, one win and one defeat. So you think really that it should be a kind of 50-50 podcast, and they're good and bad, but
you'd be wrong.
I think after anybody who's watched the match against Stoke on Tuesday night will know that this is going to be predominantly rant based. We'll be going through that. We'll be discussing where we are with the Russell Martin project and the season as a whole. And then we'll look ahead to the game against Bristol City on Sunday, because if there's anything that can really cheer everybody up, it's a 1:00 Sunday kickoff. Matt, I know you've been raring to go, so I'll let you off the leash. Come on, let it rip. Swans against Stoke, how bad was it?
Right, I've got I'm going to save the main bulk of what I want to say for the Russell Martin project part that we're going to do a little bit later. But from the game last night, I don't think anyone can have watched that game and said, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Luton game and how it divided opinion. Some thought it was really good, some thought it was really shit. There's nobody who watched that from a Swansea perspective last night and thought it was anything other than diabolical from the first moment to the last. Forget about what Russell Martin said post-match and any excuses he threw out there. It was bollocks. It was terrible. I was ashamed last night. And also apologies to anyone who follows me on Twitter who thought I may have actually lost my head last. I probably did, to be honest with you. Thanks for your concerns. I'm actually fine. But yeah, I think last night it was just like it snapped. It snapped inside me. From the first kick, Guto, and I know Steve will reiterate this, we didn't want to chase, we didn't want to battle, we didn't move for each other. We were almost like tapping the ball away if it got close to us because we didn't want to fight. We can take tiredness so far, but what I saw was 11, maybe not 11, but 8 at least shithouses on the pitch. There's no other way of saying it. We absolutely bottled that before a ball was kicked.
I mean, Matt's right, isn't he, Steve? When I looked at that lineup before kicking off and you saw, Fulton, Smith, Grimes, Downs and Ncham all in the side, there was, and Wolf playing at left wing back, only one strike up front. It didn't inspire anybody at home watching it. I can't imagine it inspired anybody in the away end, and it obviously didn't inspire the players either because, like Matt said, they just never turned up.
I think this is the thing now, isn't it? I mean, there's been criticisms of previous selections and playing players out of position and stuff like that. I think to a point there's been a little bit of leeway because we've been short in some positions and stuff like that. But I think last night was a little bit of a tipping point because of the Blackburn game. There was a sort of a change in tack where we went far more attacking, and it felt like we reverted a type yesterday. And it's the things like playing players out of position. That's what does me. And I mean, Fulton seemed to be playing further forward last night, and you think that Corey Smith has played there previously, and it doesn't suit either of them. And I think everybody thought that. And Wolf wasn't really playing in that position where he should be playing in. He's playing more towards the left, and you're thinking, like, what are we actually doing? I mean, we've seen the likes of Latibodiere playing as a wing-back previously, haven't we? And that hasn't been great. And then Downs was shunted from central midfield into playing as a centre-back when there's been, there's other options to play there. And it's just very uninspiring. And I'm at the point now where I think there is options in most of those positions. All right, granted, there was the issue of, the left wing-back position yesterday because obviously Manning was banned. And Ogbeta isn't fit enough to start yet. But, I mean, why is he making these decisions? It was very uninspiring. When I saw the team, I thought, what's he doing? And then when we all watched the game, and the performance was so bad. Like, I'm really struggling to think of any positives from it. Like, we got battered by a side that have been on poor form, and are only a couple of places above us. Yet you'd have sworn that they were like pushing at the top, and we were a side at the bottom. It's not like we were spanked by anyone that good. but it could have been worse. I mean, we were appalling, weren't we?
Stoke have won just once, I think, since the start of October at home, and that was against Peterborough, who I think everybody agrees are the worst away team in the Championship this season. They've picked up just 4 points on the road and lost 12. So, I mean, we can agree that, results against Peterborough don't count when you're playing at home. So if we take Peterborough out the equation, Stoke had not won a league game at home since the start of October, and they turned up last night and won 3-0. And the thing is, Matt, 3-0 actually flatters us. It does not begin to describe how Stoke just made us look ridiculous. I thought it looked like a bunch of hungover guys having a kickabout before
on a Sunday morning,
before a five-a-side game, just messing about almost. All the like little lazy flicks and stuff, and the lack of focus and the lack of understanding between all the players. It just did not look like a cohesive team in any way, shape or form. And it's just, for the first half, I mean, Stoke just couldn't find that finishing touch. They got into good positions. They, were very skillful. They played the ball well. They just couldn't quite execute that final ball. And then, of course, within the first, 2 or 3 minutes of the second half, they were a goal up. But it had been coming, hadn't it, Matt? And it was just a shock that it had taken them so long to actually break the deadlock.
Yeah, it was. Sticking with the theme of hungover players playing on a Sunday afternoon before five-a-side, Olivier Ntcham could have stood there with a cigarette in his mouth the first half. It just the attitude of the players was disgraceful. It was. We've been beaten by Stoke most times. It's quite infamous that we only win there every 20 years, and we had that last year. But it's normally Beauty versus the Beast, and it's normally the Beast that comes out on top. Last night, Beauty came out on top, and I've never said that, and Stoke be on the receiving end of it. Stoke gave us a footballing masterclass last night against Swansea City. It just doesn't happen. They passed us off the park. They pressed us. They wanted it more. They had the hunger, the desire. They run the lines that we wouldn't run, and it was everything we held ourselves in high regard for. Was in red and white last night. It was a shambles from start to finish.
Matt, would you go as far as saying that the way Stoke played last night is the way that we would want the Swans to play, really? Because they had 60% possession, which I think we'll get on to discuss in a while. They were skillful. Their passing was crisp. It was sharp. It was purposeful. They were creative. And they got, good shots away and scored 3 goals. I mean, that is kind of what we want from our team, isn't it?
And again, this is something I'll bring up a bit later on in the piece about Russell Martin, but it's also something we haven't done maybe once maybe we've done this season. They were creating chances. Now, we've been quite prolific, thanks to Patterson and Perot early season, which I will say as well, we've relied a lot on worldies from Patterson and Perot. How many goals have we scored this season have been fantastic, well-worked team goals? Off the top of my head, I can think of one, and it was Bidwell's against Cardiff. And apart from that, I'm really struggling to put together, perhaps there are more, perhaps you can give me 1 or 2 more, but of a season that we're over halfway through now, Swansea City, we're talking about going back to total football, and we're not doing anything like the sort of goals we were seeing under Graham Potter, under Martinez, and a lot of different eras, different players. I get it, but we're not playing. Stoke were playing last night is the sort of football which is still a fantasy to this squad and this team, because we don't do that even when we're on it. And we win games because we take the odd chance that we create. Blackburn being the absolute prime example of that, but there have been many others. We discussed before we started recording, Preston. They weren't glorious affairs. They weren't games where we thought, do you know what, we're knocking on the door here. We've really started back. Keepers at a worldie for them. It's not happened. We've not been having those sorts of games. So what Stoke have done, yeah, I agree, it's what we want to see from the Swans, but it's not something that we've shown that we can do. we've not been creating chances. The personnel goes so far for me. You can look at the players and go, oh, we need better players, we need more technical players. Well, this is the squad. We've got 6 or 7 players in that starting 11, when fit, who can play football. And bear in mind, Russell Martin's brought in a lot of players as well. But we're looking at a team now who seem unable to pass the ball forward without looking first to see if there's an easier one behind them. It's shithousery. I can't think of any other way to describe it. We turn around from the opposition's goal. One of the things I thought was hilarious about the Blackburn game, which we'll discuss in a little bit, is we played all our exciting football in our box. That was when we were trying to take people on, trying to nutmeg the opposition when they were trying to score. That was the only time we were doing it. And again, the other end of the pitch, we were looking to play it safe. It's bonkers. But yeah, Stoke were excellent. And the fact that it was 3-0, as you said a couple of moons ago now, because I've been talking for a while, it absolutely flattered us. It was a game that probably should have finished, let's be kind, I'd say if that finished 5 or 6, I think that would have been a fair reflection of the way the game went. They should have been 3 up at half time. They should have been 2 up within about 5 or 6 minutes. I
would say that it was like watching a team several divisions below Stoke take on Stoke. But if there was a team there that was several divisions below them, they would have tried a bit harder than the Swans did. I mean, Steve, Russell Martin in his post-match interview did kind of refer to the referee. The ref had one big decision to make in the game, and that was to send off Ryan Bennett when it was already 1-0 and award the penalty to Stoke. I mean, Russell Martin wasn't happy about it. Does he have any kind of right to be disappointed at it? And I feel bad actually referring to it because it was immaterial, really. I mean, we can joke that was
not a quote to Russell Martin,
but this is the thing. Russell Martin said that was a big kind of moment in the game. I would argue it wasn't. I would argue that as soon as Stoke took the lead, I kind of lost all hope that the Swans could get anything out of it.
I think the big moment of the game for me was when the ref started it, and after that it was all downhill from there.
I mean, but I mean, from my point of view, Steve, I didn't think the penalty was a big moment or the red card because the game was already lost by that point. But do we have? I mean, it's the third red card in 4-5 games. Do we have any kind of justification to feel aggrieved by it at all? And on that note, do you think Ryan Bennett will be a big loss over the coming weeks?
I'd say the penalty's a little bit unlucky, but it's tough to argue, isn't it? It's not. I don't think it's a deliberate handball. I think it's just sort of bounced up, really, isn't it? And there's not really a lot you can do about that then. And obviously, if there's handball on the line, it is what it is. You know what's coming. Will Bennett be a loss? I think it depends. I mean, if you look at the previous game with Blackburn, when he came on, he did well when we were defending our box, but obviously he's not the quickest, to say the least. Not brilliant on the ball at times, so I don't think it'll be a huge loss, but depends who plays instead. I mean, if that means that Downs plays at the back instead of him playing in midfield because we're deemed as a person short, then maybe it will be a little bit of a loss. So just depends. But I mean, I'm with you on the penalty. I mean, we were 1 down, playing terribly. I'm not really willing to make excuses of stuff like that when you've played that badly. I mean, it's clutching at straws. Like if it's 0-0 and it gets to the last minute and dodgy pen costed the game, it's fair enough then. Obviously, it's pretty obvious what that's cost you, but you really can't complain if you play abysmally. You're 1-0 down and then you end up giving away a penalty. I mean, we've got to look at yourselves, and if anyone thinks that was the reason that we lost, then they're in serious denial about yesterday's performance, because in general it was crap, and you can't blame anything else on it.
No, you really can't. I mean, by the time the penalty came along, the game was already lost, because our only hope yesterday was that Stoke would keep kind of just struggling to find an end product the way they were in the first half. But as soon as they took the lead, then that was it, really. Thankfully, I missed the third Stoke goal because the Swans website crashed for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the second half. Which was, I think, an act of mercy, really, by the club, putting fans out of their misery. So for once, kind of the the failure of technology on Swans TV was a real blessing. But I mean, there was a bit of debate yesterday, Matt, about where that stands among the kind of the really bad performances of not just this season, but kind of the last few seasons.
Yes.
I definitely think it's the worst performance of this season. I can't think of anything more inept and more insipid than what we witnessed at the Bet365 on Tuesday night. I can't really think of a Steve Cooper.
What was the score when I wanted Cooper out and we lost to Millwall? It was his fourth defeat on the bounce.
No, we beat Millwall, didn't we, to end that losing run? It was QPR, I think, that we lost.
QPR, was it?
That fourth. It was only 1-0. I mean, that's all those games, I think, were pretty.
Right.
At least most of them. I think maybe there was one there. There was like a 3-0, but it was just.
Right.
They were just really grim and uninspiring 1-0s for the most part, I think, in that run. It wasn't an emphatic 3-0, but they were bad. It has to be said. Well, they were really bad performances.
The thing is, I didn't think I'd be sitting here early February saying this on this podcast, and I'm loath to do so because anyone who's listened to this podcast over the last few years will know I was particularly vocal about Steve Cooper, and I wanted him gone, and I wanted us to go back to what we had when Graham Potter was here, and people wanted to turn up, win, lose or draw. We were exciting to watch. We were a joy to support again. It gave us the Swansea we knew back. I wanted that back, and so I was delighted when I heard we were looking at Russell Martin because of what I heard about his time at MK Dons. And I didn't think I'd be sitting here saying this, but off the top of my head, that's as bad, if not worse, than anything we saw under Steve Cooper. One of the most sorry displays in recent memory was the playoff final, of course. Now, I would say the performance last night was worse than the playoff final. And that is...
Easily.
And now, that playoff final, I think what made it worse was that there was so much opportunity and so much pride and to go and just take something. Even though we knew Brentford were streets ahead of us, we could have stolen that, and we didn't turn up, and that was a real disappointment. Last night was filled with anger because we surrendered before a ball was kicked. We shit out of every 60-40 that was in our favour. We didn't go run to the loose balls. We didn't do anything. So yeah, I've got to be true and say, if this was Steve Cooper, I'd be spitting feathers, and I am spitting feathers still. I think that was disgusting last night, and any deflection or tactics from Russell Martin are poor, are really poor. I think at some point now he has to stick his hands up and apologise for his part to play in it. It all feels a little bit, Guto, it all feels a little bit Paul Clementy to me now, where he's pointing at other things. He's pointing at the ref, he's pointing at the red card, he's pointing at players being tired, but he's left Kyle Joseph and Burns on the bench, and these players who haven't had the minutes. So you mentioned before we started recording, Jan Danda. I'm not saying these are necessarily the players you'd like to pick if everyone's fit, but we're in a sticky patch at the moment, and he knows these players are exhausted, and he's playing them out of position. He's playing these exhausted players, and then he's excusing it after the fact. I don't think it's good enough.
That's the thing, isn't it, Steve? Because the game against Stoke was Swansea's 6th in 2.5 weeks, which is a ridiculous, run of congested fixtures. Really, there are only 2 other clubs in the division with that kind of run. It's very unusual to play that many games in such a short space of time. We also, of course, played a big chunk of Saturday's game with 10 men, so that's obviously going to tire them. So you could make the argument that tiredness played its part, and they definitely look tired. But then, of course, like Matt said, the question turns then to Russell Martin, his team selection. He can't really blame tiredness when he's deliberately picked players he knows are likely to be tired. He's got players on the bench who haven't played much, who may not be as good as the first teamers, may not be anywhere near as good as the first teamers if everybody's fit. But when the first teamers are running on fumes, surely he's got a job then to say, do you know what, we're just going to have to, sacrifice them for this game and try something different. And I think this is one of the things that's frustrating fans. We're probably going to discuss this later on when we talk about where the project is at the moment. But there is this kind of hesitancy from Martin to change things when they are demonstrably not working. And I think never has that been more evident than in the defeat to Stoke.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, Grimes is a good example. I mean, he plays every minute of every game, doesn't he? I mean, is it worth taking him out of the firing line, for example, and giving him a rest? Because, I mean, you can't expect everybody to be at their best in every game in such a relentless schedule.
And I thought Grimes was really poor against Stoke as well. He really struggled. I barely noticed he was on the pitch for a lot of the game, which is something you can never say about Matt Grimes. But he just didn't factor, and when he did, he always looked stretched and really tired as well. He's another player who, when Matt Grimes has an off day, things are bad. But yeah, sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
Well, no, I mean, that's just the point I'm trying to make, isn't it? I mean, it's not a surprise. I mean, the guy is never subbed and he's never not started. So, it's a relentless schedule, this division. I mean, it is worth sometimes just taking people out of the firing line. I mean, Downs is another one who doesn't really get a rest, but obviously there was an enforced rest, wasn't it? Because he ended up having the red card at QPR. So that meant he had to sit out the game at Hull, which in some ways might not be a bad thing. It's only one game. And like I say, now and again, everybody does need to be taken out of the firing line. But, we've got some players here. I mean, Burns has come in from Man City. I mean, we're going to get another Reece Williams here where he just doesn't get picked, and all we're going to do is alienate a top team who may well then think, right, well, we're not loaning you anyone else in the future, because when we did before, you wasted our time and didn't give our player a chance. So that's not exactly going to, do us many favours, I don't think. So, he's someone that maybe should have been coming in. I mean, obviously, I know Fulton has had some more minutes recently than he's had all season, really, because he hasn't played much. So at least he's had some sort of a chance, I suppose. Obviously, we've missed Patterson, haven't we? And he didn't play last night, and I think we've seen how vital he is to us, if we're being honest. So, I think there does need to be more rotation, I would say. I mean, it's probably a good thing that Perot's had a bit of a rest, because he's been largely anonymous recently because of a lack of service. So the fact that he's, been given a couple of games where he's been on the bench probably doesn't do any harm. But, it's a hard slog in this division, and you just think that you do need to rotate more. And I think where Martin probably got it more wrong was the first few games after we came back from, the break. And it did seem as if he barely made any changes at that point. And he should have had it in his mind that obviously, there's a hectic schedule to come. And it is worth just making a couple of changes per game, really, just to try and freshen things up. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a situation where everyone's played, in about 5 games in 2 weeks or something, and then everyone just looks shattered and you get a bit of a stinker of a performance. But at the same time, I'm not willing to accept tiredness as much of an excuse for last night, because, that everyone was so poor and there has been some rotation. So that would be just too much of an easy excuse for me, because it was just that bad. And, you sometimes just got to roll their hands up and say, we've had a shocker. And that is exactly what happened last night. Okay,
so we've discussed Stoke. Let's go back in time to last Saturday when the Swans actually won the game. It was a 1-0 win against Blackburn, who are pushing for promotion to the Premier League. They've been really, really good this season. And Matt, let's discuss the game as a whole. We were ahead quite early on in the game. 2 players combining, one who hasn't been involved for obvious reasons over the last few weeks, and that's Jamie Patterson crossing for Michael Obafemi, a player who hasn't really been given too much of an opportunity this season. So those 2 combined to put us ahead, and it kind of showed what we have been missing with Jamie Patterson, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, it's the willingness to try something with Patterson. He's not afraid to do it. It doesn't come off, and he'll do it again, and he might not come off again. And the third time it'll come off, but no one will remember the first 2. And this is why I want to bang my head against a brick wall every time Coley Smith is played in that hole, because it's bonkers. The man will not try anything. So Patterson's willingness to try, and look, we don't know the full details of what went on, and we can speculate what we've seen, what we've heard, people we know who may know a little bit more about the situation. But in terms of the situation we were in, nobody won. let's not mask up the situation Patterson put us in, and let's not assume that we held the upper hand because we kept him here, because the results while he was out of the team were poor and the performances were poor. Perot's dried up and looks low on confidence now. But yes, he came back into the team and he provided that little bit of ingenuity and a little bit of invention in the final third, which we've been sorely lacking. And one of the players, perhaps over the last few games, who has impressed with his endeavour is Obafemi. So I was delighted he got his first goal at the Swansea.com stadium. I thought it had been coming for him. And after a horror of a first half of the season here for him, it was nice to see now he looks more up for it. So positives. That was a positive from that game, definitely.
The first positive of this podcast. And Steve, it was quite a positive lineup as well. I think it took a lot of people by surprise. It was a much more attacking lineup than we have seen in recent weeks. We didn't have Corey Smith playing as an attacking midfielder. We had Patterson in from the start, which was a bit of a surprise. I think we had Pirou and Obafemi starting together, possibly for the first time. So it was a much more attacking lineup than what we're used to seeing. And do you think it made a difference in the end?
Well, I joked on Twitter that Kevin Keegan had taken the Swans job, so it was a big shock to me when I saw that team, and I probably wasn't the only one. It's sort of hard to tell in general, certainly in terms of the second half, because obviously the game then changed. But it was certainly a good thing to see a more positive side out there. But did we really create a great deal more in the first half? Probably not, if we're honest. So it was almost a bit like, because you changed it so much, I suppose it would need a few games of that type of side to build up a bit of a relationship, I guess. But it was certainly more encouraging to see that we were trying to make things happen more in terms of going forward, because we've all criticised it, and we the Smith playing the attack in midfield, and you're looking and thinking, where are the goals coming from? But at least with the team that was picked on Saturday, you weren't thinking that. But obviously, with the way that the game changed with the red card, then we did go a lot more cautious. But when you've got a lead, it is understandable, really. And I think we've got to say, in that sense, we did do a good job. It's just, if you're looking at it from more
we did finish the game without the recognised striker on the pitch, mind.
Which is
another issue I've got.
It did go mentally extreme the other way. I must admit, probably a little bit too extreme. So if we just looked desperate, I suppose, just to get a result. That's what the subs probably told us, didn't they? But
yeah,
we got one, and you'd have to say, I know Blackburn did miss chances. That I never had this feeling they're going to score. I don't know why. I think
really.
No, honestly, because they kept. How many saves did our goalkeeper make?
Don't get me wrong. Fisher didn't have to make too many saves, and that was because their shooting was so bad.
Yeah, I think that might be the reason why I thought maybe they wouldn't score, because
you just thought it was going to be one of those days for them, right?
That's
what it felt like.
Yeah, it might not be the fact that I thought we were doing brilliantly, but they were not asking us the type of questions. The amount of corners they had that were bloody awful, was off the scale. And you think, well, they're not hurting us here. It was, it was not that bad. They were pinning us in our half. It reminded me of what we've done in some games, where we've literally been camped in the opposition's half, and then we haven't asked any questions, thinking, we won't be scoring. And I had that feeling from Blackburn, just because their finishing did let them down.
I thought Blackburn were really poor. I thought they were really, really bad. To have, what was it? The stat that's been repeated everywhere. Blackburn had more than 40 crosses. Mm-hmm. The Swans had one. And our one goal came from that one cross. That's a fantastic stat. But it tells a story. Because, the quality of their balls into the box, Blackburn, was, for the most part, really poor. And when it did fall to the right person, it was just, they were so wasteful in their finishing. They had two basically open goals that they missed. And I guess this brings us back, Matt, to the question of how good were the Swans, really? Because it was a 1-0 win against a promotion-chasing team. But I'll be honest, cards on the table, I didn't think we played particularly well. I thought, great to see us take the one chance that we created. I mean, games in the Championship are usually, ones of fine margins, and you need to have that quality to just, take the points, and that's what we did. But that was the only thing we created in the entire game. Despite putting all those attacking players on at the same time, we didn't create anything else. I thought a lot of the time, even in the first half when we had 11 men on the pitch, we were pretty disjointed. Our passing wasn't what it usually is. We finished the game with 48% possession, which is the lowest that we had in the Championship this season until Tuesday night, when it was down to 40. Mind, I mean, how can a Russell Martin team have 40% possession if you can't? If a Russell Martin team, if Russell Martin can't
guarantee possession, what can you guarantee?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. But I think it was a bit of a. I think the last two games have been a bit of an eye opener in terms of people saying, "Oh, it's possession stake." I think it's shown at least that we do need possession, because if we don't have possession, we have very little else. But yeah, I saw a lot of praise for the Swans' defensive effort against Blackburn, and there was some good defending there, and there was a lot of hard work. There's no doubt about it. They really put their bodies on the line, and it was a dogged defence. But Blackburn had several brilliant chances, and on another day they're winning that like 3-1, and it was Blackburn's wastefulness more than our good defending, in my opinion, that meant we held on to the 3 points. That's not. I'm usually one for that's quite positive, etc. But I can't pretend that I thought we played well against Blackburn. I thought we got lucky that the one opportunity we had went in. That's a different kind of luck. But the other piece of luck is that Blackburn were pretty poor and didn't punish us for what was, in my opinion, quite a lackluster display. With the ball at the very least, if not without the ball.
Yeah, I mean, 16,000 pissed up fans in the stadium wanted to see a Swans win, and they got what they wanted. And I think we all left happy and relieved. We got the win. We didn't expect it. We kind of thought Blackburn were roller coastering their way through the division at the moment, and they've made this huge surge the last 10 games or so to really break into that what looked like a written off top two. So credit to them for that. And we thought, God, this could be a hiding. We haven't played well in a long time. Could be a hiding. So to win on paper, if you hadn't gone to the game and you hadn't read the match report and just saw the score, you thought, fair fuck, Swans, you've done really well there. And there were positives. As we mentioned, you got Cabango and Bennett. This was a meat and drink game for them. I mean, like you say, over 40 crosses. I think I saw 45, 46 crosses, something like that. It's extraordinary, but it's exactly the sort of thing that Bennett and Cabango will eat up all day long. They thought Cabango had a superb game. Others rightly mentioned Bennett when he came in and solidified it further. But yeah, even though we had, I think 70% perhaps of their chances were nullified by those two at the back, the 30% that they did manage to get through should have ended up in goals. So they should have still scored 3, I think is fair. And I think we were extremely fortunate. But I'm not going to rewrite it. I'm going to look back on my Twitter history. I didn't go around and slag the Swans off on Saturday night because I was relieved as anyone that we got the result. And I thought some of that play, I thought Wolf, when he had to go into that left wing back position after Manning went off, I thought he did very well. He brought the ball out superbly. He was skipping past players like they weren't there. I thought he's really growing into the role here. So I was happy with him. And I say the defence. But yeah, let's not fake it. I mean, Blackburn missed some massive chances, and if they'd just taken half of them, I think they'd have still beaten us. So no, and the win was probably the most un-Russell Martin-like method of winning that you can imagine. We've won it very ugly there.
It was a performance that Steve Cooper would have been very proud of.
For sure. I mean, that was what we used to see. Is the sort of performance where you batten down the hatches, and I mean, to an extent, Cooper would perhaps hope that we would restrict the teams to fewer clear-cut chances than we had. But even under Cooper, I mean, Steve will attest to this. We were extremely lucky extremely lucky to get some of the results we did, or a lot of the results we did, because opposition were very wasteful in front of goal under him as well. And when I saw Ben Brereton and Diaz come on for Blackburn, I thought, there we go. We had a good shot at this now, and he's going to come on, and he's going to stick away the chances that the others couldn't. And nothing fell to him. He didn't get a sniff. So I think credit to the defenders for doing exactly what they would have hoped to be able to do in those circumstances. But look, let's not say that we've gone from a great performance against Blackburn to a shit one against Stoke. We haven't. We've gone from a backs to the wall performance against Stoke to we're fucking still on the coach outside the stadium performance against Stoke. It was, we haven't put in a 5-star display. We've had defenders throw their bodies in front of a goal-bound effort against Blackburn. I'm appreciative of the commitment, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't a brilliant game. It wasn't a fantastic performance. We had one chance and we scored it. So, I mean, we had to temper what we were leaving the stadium thinking was, we've won. I didn't expect it. I'm delighted with the analysis of it, which was that performance was still not... We can't say, right, let's do that every week, because we will lose 99 times out of 100 if we play that way every week. There's just no other way about it.
I mean, Steve, I thought we played better against Luton than we did against Blackburn. And I didn't think, there were problems with the Luton performance, but I thought that was a much more complete performance than what we saw against Blackburn, if I'm being honest. I don't know if you'd agree with me on that, but I just don't. I don't know. I sat there watching it and thought, do you know what, it's not right. And actually, had it not been, I think the red card in the second half sort of galvanised the crowd and kind of energized the crowd a bit and gave them something to rally against and get behind the team for, and it made it easy, wasn't it? It made it easier to support that kind of bus parking approach, and it generated a bit of atmosphere around the stadium in the second half. And without that, I'm pretty sure we would have taken the same approach, if I'm being honest, of parking the bus, because one of the things you will say this season is that the Swans, I think for the most part this season, when we have taken the lead, we haven't really known what to do with it, which is a bit surprising for a team that's meant to be a possession-based team. You'd think that we just control 80% of the ball and see it out. But I get the impression that whenever we take the lead, there's a bit of nervousness and we're not really as composed as we should be. And I think we saw a bit of that against Blackburn, where you think we don't know whether to stick or twist. We don't really know whether we want to attack or protect what we've got. And there's just this, I don't know if it's a lack of confidence or what, but they just didn't really seem to know which direction to take the game. And they needed the red card almost just to confirm, yes, we are sitting deep and we're going to just protect this lead with everything we've got.
We're probably not used to it either, because obviously we haven't been leading in many games recently. And if you probably look at the season, then we haven't had the lead that often. When you think about it, I can't think of many games that we've been in the lead that we haven't ended up winning, really. Because in most of the games that we haven't won, we haven't been in front at all. Quite a lot of them we probably haven't scored. So, I think, as you say, if there's a bit of a perfect storm, I suppose, on Saturday, wasn't it? We got a goal. I think no one went into the game with much expectation. And then, obviously, with it being a late kick-off, people have probably gone to, down the pub to watch the sport that winds me up. But it was probably a positive in that sense, because everyone came in, looked, people had had a few drinks, the atmosphere was up, and then the red card happens, and it does galvanise you a little bit. And with the crowd on side, it probably did, that's a lot of good. And obviously, as you say, it's pretty obvious when you've got 10 men and you're hanging on against the side that are towards the top of the division, that you're inevitably going to look to just sit deep rather than to try and get a second. So I think in that sense, it did work, and everybody was probably happier with it than they would have been in normal circumstances. But I do see what you mean. I mean, the Luton game is quite a polarising game. I mean, Matt thought we were awful. I thought there was bits of it that were awful. But when I thought about it, we did actually create more chances in that game than we probably have done in a lot of other games. So probably wasn't as bad as certain games. Certainly not as bad as Stoke, because nothing is. But it's a funny one. I think maybe we were all a bit more accepting in general against Blackburn as well, because they are a better side. So football can be funny in that sense sometimes, because, as I say, I mean, there's other occasions where Martin has picked teams and you're thinking, well, if a different manager was you, mainly the last one, you'd be taking pelters. But it's not always fair, I suppose, football is what I'm trying to say. I think, what one manager does, he'll get criticised for, but then everybody else will maybe support it if someone else does it. So it could be a funny game at times.
Let's move on then. We've discussed Stoke, we've discussed Blackburn. Let's discuss where we are in the league, because if you read in social media at the moment, I think there is
stay off mine. For fuck's sake, stay off my account.
stay away from Matt's Twitter account. You do not want to read what he's been posting over the last few days. But there's definitely a quite reflective tone, I think, on social media following the Stoke defeat. I think a lot of people looking longer term back beyond the Stoke game. The Stoke game was a nightmare. I mean, I describe it as a train crash, but usually the train has to leave the station for it to be involved in a crash. I mean, the Swans were just parked on the platform and a steamer came charging into it and blew it to smithereens. That's what we saw at Stoke. But I mean, ignoring Stoke almost, because that's an extreme case. It's by far the worst we've played this season. But there is this issue, isn't there, that there are mistakes being repeated time and time again, and a general slow deterioration. And it's not that the Swans are absolutely awful every game. There are some positives in some games. There are some games where, there are better periods of play, and some other games where we're generally poor throughout. But Matt, looking back over the entire season, I think it's fair to say that since that 2-1 victory against Coventry, I don't think the Swans really, and that was back at the start of November, I think it's fair to say the Swans haven't really hit those heights since then, and we haven't seen the kind of complete performances that we saw back in October, back in November, the games against the likes of Cardiff, Peterborough, West Brom, Coventry. Some of those teams were and are absolutely abysmal, but West Brom were an automatic promotion chasing team back then. Coventry had one of the best home records in the division. We were getting good results against high flying teams and playing really well as well. But something's gone wrong since then, and it's not continued to develop the way we would have hoped. So where are the Swans now in terms of this season and in terms of the Russell Martin project as a whole?
Well, this is kind of weird, isn't it? Because I think when we talked about this in the summer, or the very end of the summer as it was, because he joined a couple of days before the season started, I think it was a wide acceptance that this season would be a season of transition. We never really talked about what that meant. And I think we all just thought, well, do you know what? In essence, what we're saying is, as long as we stay up this season, it's a good season. But subtext is what we were looking at, is we were looking to say, let's rip it up. 2 years of Cooper, another thing that massively divided this fan base. But we need to rip it up and start again. I thought what we would see was a disastrous start to the season. It was a slow start, mind. Don't get me wrong. It was a very slow start. But we would see the building blocks come in. And what we had was, we had the slow start. And when we got that result at Bristol City, but when we got we started putting a couple of results together, then we started flying out of the blocks. And then all of a sudden we're thinking, shit, I was expecting this to take 6-7 months. Now we're flying. And then the wheels come off the track. I'm sticking with your train analogy. It completely came off the tracks, and now we're in a crumpled heap somewhere, and I don't know how we get back.
Is it that bad? Are we in a crumpled heap? Because that suggests that this is this is beyond repair almost, and this is going to be really you're basically suggesting that it's a hopeless cause almost.
No, because what I think we've got is, you mentioned the bigger picture, and you're looking back to the 2nd of November, was it the 4th of November, one of the two, the Coventry game, just before we played Bournemouth, and we were talking about, look, we get a result against Bournemouth and we're top 6 potentially. And then since that point, it's not been a case of, look, you know what, let's wash our hands of Stoke and move away. Because we've already discussed that Blackburn, we got the result, but the performance wasn't there. The bigger picture from me, Guto, is that we're not learning any lessons. There's been no sign of progression in how we address our massive frailties. Let's just take a little thing here about our wing-back situation. I would say here's the perfect example. In fact, you didn't see the third goal for Stoke last night. The third goal for Stoke last night was, I can't remember his name. He cut in from the far right-hand wing, and he carried on unchallenged, and he fired in what was an excellent shot from the corner of the box into the far side of Fisher's goal. It was a great goal. It was an acute angle, but we have a massive weakness in behind our wing backs, and it's been there for months, and we don't do anything about it. Week in, week out, we create massive opportunities. If I was the opposition manager, I'd get the tactics board out and I'd draw 2 big circles round by the corner flags, and I'd say there and there, that's where we're going to hurt Swansea every game, and every game it happens. How many times have teams fired the ball across the 6-yard box and not had a tap in because they've just been wasteful? I mean, we could have conceded a hell of a lot more goals, but the reality is we've been lucky that teams haven't been very prolific in taking their chances. But those holes in behind the defence on either side of your Bennett and Kabangos is a glaring issue, and it's been there well before Christmas, and we've mentioned it multiple times in this podcast, but we're not doing anything about it. So that's one big issue, is this shape. I'm talking about this shape isn't working. He needs to address that now. It's every game we're risking throwing away a good performance because we're not addressing that. By the way, feel free to interject, cut in, disagree, whatever, because that's just one part of it. Another part is attitude. I'm not talking about last night. Last night was just absolute stinker. But I'm talking about the sort of ambition when we get to the opposition area, that we look for the easy option. We look to move it wide. We turn around when we've got a crossing opportunity and play it back inside. Perot must want to run headfirst into the goalpost and knock himself out, because every time we get the ball wide, we come back. We move it around. We get the opposition to get their back 4. They may as well stand there and chat for 5 minutes while we decide what we're going to do with the ball. So attitude when we get in the opposition box. We are so pathetic at trying things when we get there that it's a non-entity. And he's not addressed that. And the selection of Corey Smith in attacking midfield every week, that is a big problem, because that is the epitome of the issues we're finding when it comes to creating chances.
It symbolises. I feel it symbolises a lot. Corey Smith, more than just Corey Smith as a player and the role he's asked. The fact that he is time after time chosen to play in that position when it has been proven so many times not to work. That, I think, is quite symbolic, really, of a major issue that we've had this season.
And it's a huge blind spot. Apart from the wing-back position, it's a huge blind spot of Russell Martin's, that when Patterson was unavailable, he was his go-to guy. As one of my mates said, he'd have rather Cal Norton play there. And that is a valid argument, because I think Cal Norton would have done more going forward, and he's not afraid to move the ball forward. Corey Smith, I mean, that is the most damning assessment of Corey Smith, is that I'd rather Cal Norton have played in that role than him. Another thing that upsets me and annoys me is this obsession over possession. And I take into account what you said earlier, is that our possession is all we've got. And I think that's what we need to rip apart and analyse now. How great are we if we can purr over 64, 65% possession and say that that's a sign of us being a great team? And we look at it and we've had 2 shots. Or 2 shots on target, because for me it was possession with a purpose. That's what I was hoping for when Russell Martin came in. It wasn't pass the ball around the back. Barnsley being a key example of this. We nearly broke the EFL record, didn't we, for passes in that game. But until Manning and Cham come on and actually went more direct with the ball, Barnsley were happy to sit there and watch us pass it between Grimes and Downs all game. We weren't doing anything with it. So possession is great if you're going to try and use it against the opposition. Passing it around at the back and passing it around in midfield, it doesn't do anything. And 65% possession is only good if that is tallied up with 10 shots on target with it. Look at Blackburn, Stoke. Stoke had, what did you say it was? 62%? 60% possession. So they had 60% possession, but they had chances and they used the ball. And there was one moment last night, I was listening to the Stoke commentator stream, and they said it actually came to, what's his name? Swansea's favourite for Stoke. Clucas, thanks, Clucas. It came to Clucas, who'd come off the bench, and he took a touch, and the guy who scored, actually, I can't remember, he was the guy on the far right, he was a pest.
It was Brown, wasn't it?
Brown, that's it, Brown, that's him. He'd made a fantastic run, guess where? In behind a fullback, shock horror. He got in behind the fullback, and Clucas took a touch, took another touch, and then played it off to the side. And the commentators moaned and said, no, keep positive, keep pushing the ball forward. And I thought, yes, absolutely. Because Clucas there took the easy option. But the ball was on, and that we don't do that. But Stoke last night, by and large, did do it, apart from that one occasion. And that stood out to me, that they were bemoaning the one chance, or the one time they didn't try the forward ball. Listen, I'm going to give Steve a go here, because I could go on all night. But from my point of view, there are 3 or 4 massive things. When I say that we were a train crash, it's more an analysis of where we've been since early November, whereby we haven't addressed any of our most blatant issues, and we just ignore them and roll the dice next game that somehow they would fix themselves. It is the definition of insanity to try the same thing over and over again and expect different results.
Steve, how much of this is down to Russell Martin? Because other people have pointed to the fact that, the transfer window didn't go as planned. We've got quite a thin squad. Couple of other excuses offered up, but bottom line is, since that win away at Coventry, the Swans have won 3 league games, they've drawn 3 league games, and they've lost 7. That's not a good record. How much blame does Russell Martin take for that?
I think obviously, the transfer window wasn't brilliant. I mean, in the end, they did bring players in that meant we weren't left overly short in a particular position, which was the main thing. And obviously, last night was a case of the left wing back issue. But I mean, there's certain lessons, as Matt said, that are not being learned. Players being played in silly positions and stuff like that. And I honestly think now we're at the point where he seems to think that is the way forward, because there is no need now to play Corey Smith or someone like that in an attacking position, because we've got Ansham, we've got Patterson's come back, and we've got Wolf. So we're not short. So we really shouldn't be doing it. And the fact that we're still doing it now is starting to really wind me up. So I think that's sort of the issue I'm at. You always want to see progress, don't you? And as Matt really said, we're not learning the lessons. That's what's alarming. And if the manager doesn't see it like that, then we're going to continue to suffer in certain ways. So I think that's what's concerning. I think yesterday was the first time for me where I am looking at the manager now and thinking he's making mistakes that I'm not comfortable with. I'm nowhere near the point of saying I want to change or anything like that, but I am looking at him now more than I have been previously and thinking you need to wake up a bit and you need to make certain changes, because, this isn't good enough now. I think we were expecting a slow start to the season. When he was at MK Dons last year, they did improve quite a lot in the second part of the season, and that's sort of what I'm expecting. Maybe not drastic improvements, but certainly for us to play better, to be better on the ball and create more chances, not be as easy to score against. And then ultimately that would lead to, you'd expect more points in the second half of the season than the first. And I can't say at the moment I'm overly confident that that's going to happen. So I think that's what the frustration is. I think he certainly maybe needs to look himself in the mirror and, maybe not make as many, some of the decisions he's been making, because they are contributing to why we're not picking up the results. And ultimately why we're playing badly in a lot of games.
Do you have any faith, because this is what it comes down to, do you have faith in Martin to make those changes? Because, the way we're all discussing this now, that's what it comes down to, is the ability to see when something is not working and find solutions for that. Do you have faith in Martin that he is going to do that over the coming games, even just between now and the end of the season?
Well, I think after last night, I have got some doubts. I think that's what concerns me. I still think he might. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? But I thought some of the decisions he was making previously were almost like a bit of a point to prove to the board, look, you've got to give me a left wing back because I'm having to play Lafayette there. You've got to give me a more attacking midfield player because I'm playing Smith there. And they, in the end, they have done that. Maybe Noah Bean has not been fit yet, but I think when there has been some backing with it, to then still be playing players in certain positions, and the fact that the centre half did come in as well, and he hasn't had a look in yet, it makes me think, rather than him trying to prove a point, that is what he sees as his best options, and that's not something I agree with at all. And I would say the performances and results back that up, and the fact that he's still doing it then is concerning. So we'll have to wait and see, won't we? But I think yesterday is the first time I'm looking and thinking there are one or two doubts there in terms of, is he going to keep making the same mistakes?
I think yesterday I think it's been a bit of a watershed moment. I think a lot of people have sort of changed their kind of thinking, because I don't know, from my point of view, I've tried to be kind of pretty plain and simple in my assessment of Martin throughout the season. I earlier on the season, when there were, I think a couple of people were getting very excited about kind of green shoots of recovery, and the fact that we were getting, monstrous amounts of possession even when we were losing. I was kind of not really getting too kind of carried away with that. And likewise, when then the Swans were kind of having a bit of a downer over the last few months, I haven't been getting too far down, because I still see that there are kind of positives there. But I just think, I don't know, that there is this thing as well, that whenever people have been kind of critical of the system, the approach, or anything like that, I think people have been very quick to kind of attack them and categorize anybody who kind of criticizes as some kind of like Martin out opponent or something like that. And in actual fact, I think the people who are genuinely Martin out are a tiny minority at this stage. I think there are very few fans out there who genuinely think we should get rid of Russell Martin. But I think there are an awful lot of people who are starting to just get quite frustrated, I think, and start to question the direction that we're going in. And I think the Stoke game was so bad, I think it's just prompted this bigger discussion really about Martin, about how it's working at the moment. And there are a lot of kind of cliches that get thrown about, sort of like possession sake, and sideways passing, etc. These kind of things get repeated, etc. But when you look past those cliches, there are some facts there that, like you said, Matt, we spend an awful lot of energy trying to pass the ball out from the back, by which point the opposition is usually camped back and they're ready to defend against us. Things like that, things like the constant playing players out of position. And there are some players who've been played out of position which have worked fantastically. I mean, Norton's had a good season. Ryan Manning has been much better at left centre-back this season than he has been at left wing-back, for example. But there are other examples which definitely haven't worked, and yet he's persisted with them. These are issues that are becoming recurring themes in our season by now. And I just, I think we could all. I just think it's left the whole project feeling a bit stale at this stage. I think it needs a real freshness once again, because again, looking beyond Stoke, I think just over the last few months, players have increasingly looked like they don't really have that conviction in what they're doing anymore. They don't really have that belief that the football they're playing is going to yield success.
Can I ask can I ask a question to you two then? Would you agree or would you disagree that maybe the players themselves are doubting whether or not this style of play is the right way in the way they're playing at the moment?
I mean, we don't know. All we can go off is their body language and their behaviour. But I think, looking at recent games, I think it does look like there's a bit of frustration on their part that, they are following what the manager's asking them to do, but it's not yielding those kind of successes. And they have been doing a lot of things right. I mean, their passing game has been very good up until, say, the final third. And then it just kind of stops in the final third. And there's, that it's just not quite clicking the way it was, say, back in October, November, when it really did look like we were building to something. I don't know how you feel about this, Steve, but from my point of view, the last few games, it's just looked like the players are just struggling really to get it to click. And yeah, from my point of view, it does look like perhaps more than anything, they're just struggling to kind of get behind it just because it's not yielding the kind of performances and results that we would have wanted. And it does look to me like there's a real frustration there.
Well, it could be that, couldn't it? I mean, I do wonder sometimes if, like, obviously we all want to see this style of football, I think, but at the same time, can you introduce it, as extremely as we have been? Maybe you need to, until you've got the players that you want for it. I'm not saying to go the opposite way and go completely direct, but maybe there's a time to play out and there's a time maybe to not take as many risks, even if it's a case of trying to pass the ball forward. In the case of if then you give the ball away, you're not giving the ball away in as much of a dangerous area type of thing. So I wonder if sometimes that's maybe what we should be doing, but I think it's pretty obvious. The manager has told them that we're going to play this way. He's told them it from day one, and inevitably in the short term, he will take pain for it. But some of these players, if we're being honest, particularly some of the defenders, I think it's just not good enough to play this way. So then it's uncomfortable for them, and maybe we need to, not take quite as many risks. That's how I'm looking at it. I'm not saying I completely go against it, but at the same time, there's definitely a time to do it and a time to not. I mean, I'll give you a good example now. I don't know if you remember the game last season where Liverpool played Man City, and Man City ended up winning 4-1. And I remember at 1-1, Alisson made a mistake. He passed the ball out, got into centre, City scored. And I remember 5 minutes later, a similar thing happened where Alisson's got the ball. And I remember thinking, City are pressing you, don't play it short because you're asking for trouble. Go for a more longer pass just because they're putting you under pressure at this stage of the game. And if you cock up here and concede again, you are done. He played it short, he gave it away, and they scored again, and that was the game over. And I just think sometimes, depending on what stage of the game it is, you need to maybe not take quite as many risks, and just taking it from that point of view, really. And I think we're not budging from it at all, are we?
I think this comes back to the core issue of that there's possession by itself is neither good nor bad. You can have 80% possession and have a stinker and have a pretty mediocre performance as we had against Barnsley.
Yeah.
You can also have a minority of possession but play really, really well. Possession in itself doesn't mean good or bad, but there is a difference between good possession-based football and bad possession-based football. And I think the dial has gone too far towards the bad possession football over the last few months. We discussed, I think, before recording tonight, the fact that Swansea put so much energy into playing out from the back, but it doesn't stretch the opposition. The Luton game was quite telling for me because Luton started by pressing us quite high, and for the first 5 minutes they caused us problems. But after that, we settled down, and actually, I think we saw in that game that our defenders, when they've got the ball at their feet, I actually think they're much better than a lot of people give them credit. I think Ben Cabango, for example, of course, there are a few misplaced passes, there are a few decisions which aren't right, but generally speaking, I think he's been pretty good with the ball at his feet this season, and I think he is good enough to play this system. And I think that goes generally for our entire defence. I think generally we've played the ball very, very well. The problem is that we put all this effort into playing it out from the back. And, I'll go back to the Luton game. After that first 5 minutes, where Luton were really putting us under pressure, we managed to play the ball around them, and we created a lot of space. And we had a couple of openings, and it looked exciting. But then Luton kind of worked out very quickly, okay, they found a way around our press. Let's go back to plan B. Let's park the bus. And that's then a sign that, in my eyes, we've been figured out. And we haven't had an answer. We haven't found an answer to those teams that have figured out how to play against us. That's again, bad possession football for me, when you have all the ball but don't know how to convert that into meaningful chances, and don't know how to stretch the opposition, because the whole point of possession football is that you stretch the opposition and pick holes. That's what Man City are so brilliant at.
Liverpool, when they trounced the league, they would do this. People would say Liverpool fantastic possession team, but they would move the ball about and through defence and midfield and bring people out, and then a quick ball over the top for Salah or whatever, and bang, it's a goal out of nothing. And it's using the opposition, dragging them from left to right and drawing them in and trying to get them to press you and to try and get the ball off you. That would be the moment then where you go, right, now we strike. And that's the bit that we don't do. And I think there's many elements, and I keep hearing this, going back to what you were saying a little bit earlier on, both about this. We don't have the players to play the style that Russell Martin wants to play. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure that the defenders exist at this level to play the way Russell Martin wants to play. We'd have to have 3 of the best defenders in world football. I mean, we want our centre backs to be dominant in the air to repel the Blackburns of the world. We want them to be mobile as hell, because they've got to cover the wing backs who are up the pitch and stop the balls coming into the box. They've got to track runners. It seems to me, and maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, it seems to me, first and foremost, the system isn't right. I don't like the system. I'm not a massive fan of the way we're playing, in the shape we're playing. And I think we are creating our own problems. And we're not creating overloads when we're going forward. We're not getting 2-on-1s where we can exploit and harm teams that way. We're very much you play left wing back, you play right wing back, you play in this position, and we move the ball. The players don't really move into each other's positions. So they're very quite static, and the ball moves left to right and right to left. So in that case, we can't hurt teams by overloading one area of the pitch. So then we then have to move the ball quickly into the spaces on those one-on-ones to hurt teams when they have dragged out of position. But we don't do that either. So what I'm seeing is that we're not very effective going forward at all. And at the back, we've got these 2 gaping holes either side of the centre-backs, which says, come and attack me. So for me, that is, I've said for a little while, but I'm getting more conviction in it when I think it's too easy to blame personnel and say, next season we'll have better players. Next season it'll be fine. I think this goes beyond personnel. I think it goes about mentality. I think it goes about attitude, but also it goes about the system. And I think these 3 things would help tomorrow. And I think just leaving it as it is and thinking, we'll have better players next season, it'll be fine. I don't know who could play the way we want to play, because it is very demanding.
Well, let's move on then, because I think we all agree that the Swans could do with a break right now, just to give us and the players a bit of a rest. But it's not coming. We have got a game coming up on Sunday. It's a short trip for our visitors, Bristol City, crossing the Severn Bridge, coming down to the Liberty Stadium. And they are going to be coming here on the back of a win if the current scoreline holds up. They're winning 2-1 at home against Reading at the moment. Steve, this, it's kind of a derby against Bristol City, but it isn't. Is this a good game for the Swans to be playing at the moment, or is there no such thing as a good game for the Swans right now?
It's hard to tell, isn't it? I think... who knows with the Swans? That's the truth of it. I mean, fairly unpredictable, I would say, in terms of results at least. So I really don't know. I don't think Bristol City are a great side. Obviously, they're bringing a lot of fans down here. Honestly, it really is. It's hard to say. I mean, I wouldn't want. It's not a terrible one, I guess. I mean, wouldn't want to play Fulham at the moment, would you? I know obviously we've got them coming up in the next few weeks. We'll see. I think the Sunday thing doesn't help, does it? I think I don't think the crowd is going to be as good as it was for the Blackburn game, certainly in terms of noise anyway. But we're going to have to. But I can't say I feel overly optimistic at the moment, but this is the Swans, so you don't know, do you? We have got a history of pulling rabbits out of the hat when you least expect it, so I wouldn't rule anything out.
No, and in fairness, Blackburn was a bit of a rabbit in terms of the result anyway. Matt, in some ways, Bristol City are kind of similar to us in the sense that they are trying to kind of go down a different direction. They've invested quite a lot of faith in youth this season, but it's not really clicked entirely for them either. They've had spurts where it looks like it may be clicking, and then it's been followed up with some really crushing results. They lost 6-2 to Fulham the other day, for example, and prior to tonight's game they'd gone 3 games without a win. For what it's worth, I think Bristol City have exceeded my expectations. I thought they'd actually really struggle this season under Nigel Pearson. But it has been a bit of a stop-start season, and they're kind of in this position where I don't know if they really know where they're going yet. Is this the start of something new and exciting, or are they just still stuck in a bit of a rut? So I think there are similarities between the two teams, really. I don't know if you see it the same way.
Yeah, just across the channel, there's 3 blokes doing the same podcast, I think, over there, just asking the question of the long-term picture of Bristol City. But no, I think it is very much, you can see the similarities. I actually don't necessarily completely agree with what Steve said about the fact that Bristol City might not be, whether it's, don't even know if this is what you said, Steve, could think about it, whether you said it was not actually an ideal thing, because I think the distraction of it being the kind of derby that one of the few we look forward to in that sense, might be the welcome distraction. It might be the exact kick up the arse that we need after the performance we just saw. I mean, there's no excusing what a game like on Sunday. I do think the atmosphere will suffer. But it's Bristol City at home. I'm sure there'll be very little excuse for anything resembling the performance that we saw last night. And I think maybe if we had like a Preston or someone at home, then you might see the sort of attempt, decent start, decent first 10 minutes, or we didn't take that chance, and then boo, nothingness again. But I'm not sure that the game will necessarily allow for that against us. I hope not anyway. I hope it will be the sort of affair that will make us step up our game. I really hope it is. I mean, Patterson and Corey Smith, I hope the latter doesn't feature, to be honest with you, but they're both Bristol City legends. So from their point of view, they'll both want to get one over on their old club as well. We do have that kind of ex-player thing going on. So we mentioned a little earlier on before we started recording about Casey Palmer. He's not featuring much, but then we got that situation. He'd probably score now on Sunday as well. So I kind of think that, and I what Bristol City's views on how their season are going is obviously a lot more of a authentic viewpoint than I could offer. But I can agree with you that it looks like our seasons are following similar paths. But as you say, you expected Bristol City to struggle. They've clawed themselves up. I mean, we started the evening above them, but if the result stays the same, they'll go above us into 16th. So we're there or thereabouts in the lower reaches of mid-table, and it's not going. Neither team are going to be doing anything in May, but hopefully this will be the sort of game which is the perfect distraction for Russell Martin to get last night out of the system.
Steve, what does he need to do, or what would you like to see him do to help get that malaise out of the system? Because we've talked a lot about the kind of changes that need to happen long term, but what can be done in the short term that you think could have the biggest impact ahead of the Bristol City game?
Play your best players in their best positions. It shouldn't really be rocket science, should it? Play Wolf behind the striker. Do the same with Patterson. Manning will have to play wing back if Ogbeater's not fit. Play Burns. Play an actual centre half in there. Move Downs back into midfield. Just these things that should be fairly straightforward. That I think most managers would do. I think if you do that, we will look like a more balanced and a better side, and we'll probably be better at both ends of the pitch. So, it's, from my point of view, it should be quite straightforward in terms of what he should do. Stop trying to overcomplicate things. Play your players in positions that suit them, and then see what happens from there. I think if he does that, we will see a better performance from us, and hopefully that will lead to a better result. So, I'm hoping that a severe lesson has been learned from last night. I suppose we'll have to wait and see. Yeah,
from Bristol City's point of view, they've had a couple of impressive youngsters. Semenyo's really started hitting form recently. Masengo in midfield has been performing really well this season, although he's gone off with an injury against Reading. Alex Scott, by all accounts, has done really well as attacking midfielder for them, and Andreas Weiman's having his best season for a number of seasons. So they've got a few players to look out for. But Matt, with the way things have been recently, and particularly after Saturday night, can the Swans get the attitude right to combat a team like Bristol City, do you think?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Saturday. You talked about it earlier on about the surprise in the formation. We can't win, can we? We'll complain about the lack of attacking intent. We saw it last night, and we've seen it in previous games as well. We talked about Luton a little earlier on, where we said that this may have been before we started recording. We said Norton went off injured, and Corey Smith came on. Corey Smith moved into the hole. That forced Ncham to come out of his central position and move wide. It killed us in that game, and it was just completely unnecessary. With the options we had on the bench. And so I've lost my thread now. Sorry. Yes, I'm back with it. We went really attacking at home against Blackburn. And I remember me and Steve talking during the game, thinking he's almost gone. We wanted 4 attacking options. Steve mentioned there, play Wolf in behind the striker and play Patterson in behind the striker, and then if you've got your likes of Obafemi and Perot up front, or if you have 4 options going forward, we could talk about Ncham as an option as well, but I'd prefer him to sit this one out, to be honest with you, particularly after last night. But I think I don't think he's got the engine at the moment anyway. He's been ineffective for quite some time. So I'd like to see, rather than us go from 2 attacking options to 5, I'd rather just find a happy medium in there, and let's go with offering that extra attacking option and give 1 extra player up the pitch. Like Steve said, let's get Wolf up the pitch, because when he's got on the ball, I think he can do something, and he's growing, but he's got to play the players in the right position. It has to happen. And Steve mentioned it just now, and anything else is again, it's a surrender before we start, because it's forcing square pegs in round holes, and now there's no excusing it. So start with the players in the right position, and then let's just give ourselves let's not go gung-ho, but let's give ourselves something going forward. Give ourselves 1 extra attacking option, so that when we've got more players in the final third that can receive the ball in space and create chances, which we're finding so difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I'm going to ask you both for a prediction. Matt, start with you. What's the scoreline going to be on Sunday?
I think the scoreline is going to be 1-0 Swansea.
Oof, finishing with a bit of positivity. We like it, Steve.
I think it's a good game to come up after Tuesday. I really do.
Okay, Steve, do you share Matt's positivity?
I can't predict wins because we never win when I say that. So I'm going to go for a terrible 0-0.
I don't think anybody sees this being a good game, do they?
No.
I mean,
No, absolutely
it'll be our 7th game in like 3 weeks. Games against Bristol City are always low scoring and always, pretty grim. And I don't know, the fact that it's a 1 p.m. kickoff on a Sunday. I mean, kickoff times don't get much worse than that, do they? It's going to be awful. I think it's going to be a 1-0 win to Bristol City. I can't see how we go from Tuesday night Stoke to beating Bristol City. Stranger things have happened, but I just see a player like Semenyo, for example, and I just think, you could probably put him in that Stoke team and he'd fit in perfectly. And the way he plays, I could just see him full of confidence, just really, punishing any slackness we can have in our passing at the back. So I'd love to end this this podcast on a rare positive, but I'm sorry, that's not what you signed up for. I started listening to this podcast. It would be so off-brand if I was to finish this with, well, actually, I think after slating the team for 90 minutes or whatever it's been, I actually think we're going to really put in a good show against Bristol City, and I think we're going to Swansea way return. It's going to be 4-0, and Corey Smith is going to get a hat trick. That's the way it's going to be. It's not. Hopefully it'll be a win. I can't pretend I'm that confident, but one thing I'm really hopeful for is that we'll have a bit more positivity on the next podcast. So really sorry for getting you all down. This hasn't been the pick-me-up you were looking for, but hope you found it entertaining, cathartic, less torturous than watching Stoke, whatever it's been for you. Hope you'll join us next time. But until then, thank you very much for listening.